I am Brock Stanton. I am back with another video covering 3 days of severe weather, though we are mostly going to be taking a look at the day 1 and day 2 threat. So here's our day 1 threat. This is an enhanced risk. It's mostly driven by damaging winds, including some that could be significant or hurricane force, so 74 miles per hour or higher. So we could see some wind gusts, 70, 80 miles per hour, and this would be an overnight threat. But then you're also going to notice there is and this is like overnight, early morning hours. There's this 10% here for tornadoes across parts of Louisiana and southwestern Mississippi. And this is an overnight threat. Really, all the tornado threats are going to be overnight. So it's very important you have ways to get your watches and warnings in the overnight hours. And then also, I'm not going to talk too much about this because this is ongoing at the time of recording, but across parts of Texas, west of Dallas, there could be some scattered instances of hail, including some that could be 2 to 3 inches in diameter. Well, a few instances of those, not too many of those, but some isolated 2 to 3 inch hail is also possible. Now, the biggest story of today's video is going to be this. You're going to see a very widespread enhanced risk, or 3 out of 5 threat level, and there's a tornado risk as well with this, including a very broad 10% risk, as well as a significant, which is also 10% significant, which is for EF2 tornadoes or higher. In this threat, it's going to be best if any isolated storm can develop ahead of the line, which I will be showing you in a minute. It will actually be the same line of storms that will develop later tonight across portions of Texas. And then there's this day 3. It's going to load, please. So here's our day 3 enhanced risk, and I'm not going to be talking as much about this, not because I don't think it's significant, it's just farther out and there's other significant days of severe weather we have to cover. So we will take a brief look at this, but we can see this is mostly for damaging winds. A line of storms will develop and could bring fairly widespread damaging winds. And then there's also a day 4 risk. We're not going to talk about this anymore. Again, it's far out. There's a lot more days of severe weather to cover beforehand, and those days seem to be substantial. Not saying this day won't be. I haven't looked at the models for this one in a little bit, but again, there's just other days closer that are more important to cover since they are closer. So we're going to be taking a look at the HRRR first, and so we're going to start it out over Texas. And we're going to go to reflectivity, and we are going to see these storms. Oh, we have to go to the 18Z. You can see these storms developing. These are storms that are developing now. The strongest storms will be capable of hail possibly over 2 inches in diameter, and perhaps a very isolated tornado threat right now. But you can see in the overnight hours, as the storms congeal into a line, there's going to be stronger wind shear, and that is going to give a risk of very strong damaging winds as well as some tornadoes. So we're going to see here's our line of storms. We're just going to watch it for a little bit develop. Again, we can see the HRRR tries to develop these discrete supercells ahead of the line. I think these storms may struggle to mature, but the low-level shear environment's pretty good, so it would really only take one or two storms to greatly increase the tornado threat. So just keep an eye on it. You can see these storms are going to continue moving east, and we're going to get into the morning hours then. And this is around around 7 in the morning here. And again, we'll come back to this later as this continues east. So now we're going to look at the shear, and this is just going to be we're going to start at the upper level shear and work our way down. So we're going to see these storms that are ongoing right now are probably going to have a 40 to perhaps 50 knots of bulk shear to work with, and that's why these storms will be supercellular in nature. And we're going to see it's going to increase further overnight, helping to organize the storms even more. And you can see the shear environment's upper level is going to be favorable for all modes. Again, especially overnight with the lower amounts of instability, which we will show. And in the storm mode, you won't see as many instances of large hail, but still you could perhaps see an isolated instance or two of it. So we're going to look at the upper level wind field, or not upper level, but some of the lower level winds. So this is the 850 jet, and this is a strong contributor to our tornado potential, and we can see in the evening hours, there's not much of it. And that's why the tornado threat is basically non-existent right now. But as you ramp up into the overnight hours, as we go into the overnight hours, we can see how the shear increases dramatically. You can see as we get into the overnight hours and early morning, you can see this strong low-level jet, and I bet if we take a sounding from here, yeah, we can see how it's a looping hodograph which favors tornadoes, and the cape is going to be fairly low with this overnight threat, but still with the strong low-level shear, we can definitely see some instances of tornadoes, and damaging winds 60, 70, 80 miles per hour, not out of the question. So we can see that very strong low-level shear and these storm relative helicity values, which remember is basically the horizontal rotation, and that if it gets stretched vertically by an updraft of a storm, it turns into a tornado. So it's very important to see that, and we're going to see the values again early on, basically none. And we're going to see they increase overnight, and you want these values over 100 and 150 to see tornadoes. And we can see those really don't happen until we get into the overnight hours. So again, make sure you have a way to see the warnings overnight. Make sure you have something that's going to wake you up. You don't want to not know a tornado's coming. That's a very scary thing to happen. Tornadoes can be scary even when you know they're coming, let alone when you have no idea they're coming. So again, we're going to look at the 0 to 3 levels, and you want values generally over 200. You can see again those develop over in the overnight hours and really develop even more. And just see that they're very strong. I mean, over 500 perhaps, over 300, like 300 to 600. That's very strong. But now we're going to look at the cape, and we're going to see in the overnight hours. You can see here, so you can see the storm advancing as the cape decreases. Which is very interesting to watch. We can see our liner storms are here, sufficient instability out ahead. We're going to take a sounding, and you can see quite here the strongest low-level wind shear hasn't quite arrived yet, which is why, I mean, you can still see an isolated tornado with this, but the hodograph isn't really looping too much. It's mostly straight. But as we keep going a little bit, go over here, we're going to see it start to turn just a little bit more, and again, this is why we could see a little more instances of tornadoes the overnight hours. And this is a significant tornado parameter, and this helps kind of visualize it. This isn't perfect, but it's a good idea to help visualize at base value where there's a good low-level shear and instability overlap. So we can see, again, overnight hours, and this is like 1, 2 in the morning. I believe 1 in the morning, because this is in Texas, so the time zones are different from where I'm recording this, but you can see, again, continues, you can see how that tornado threat will continue, and again, we'll cover the areas farther east in a bit. But now we're going to take a look at the NAM. We're going to take a look at the reflectivity, and we can see how these storms develop, and they're going to mature into a squall line and race eastward. And we can see this is again in the morning hours. So again, these areas can have a very difficult morning commute when you have these storms that will be capable of strong damaging winds and perhaps scattered tornadoes as well as some large hail. So we are now going to look at the Cape, and we're going to see how even into the overnight hours, so this one it's a bit less aggressive with the overnight Cape. We can still see some sufficient values. Again, this isn't a high amount of instability, but given the strong low-level shear, it's definitely sufficient for some tornado threat as well as damaging winds. Again, with this overnight mode, we could see winds gusting 60, 70, 80 miles per hour, which again, especially once you get into the 75, 80 mile per hour range, I mean, you'll see a tornado rated 80 mile per hour winds. Not really a difference between 80 mile per hour EF0 tornado and a 80 mile per hour straight line wind gust. Those are both going to do the same amount of damage. So it's very important to keep that in mind. We are going to look at the low level shear, and we can see how, again, around Dallas and areas east, again, it starts to ramp up a lot. You can see how it just continues to increase. And this is why that tornado threat is going to increase overnight despite less instability for thunderstorms. You can just see how this strong low level shear, I mean, 40, 50, we'll see how this will continue, get perhaps over 60 knots, and that's going to be favorable for perhaps some strong tornadoes. Again, we'll discuss that a little bit later. Again, everything's looks to be favorable. Not everything. The instability is weak, but the shear is going to make up for the lack of instability, and we're going to see I think a fairly robust tornado setup overnight. So this is our energy helicity index, and this is the blend of Cape and Shear. You can see how there's going to be those values there overnight, and it's just going to go, and despite the less instability, it's still going to be there. And again, in the morning as instability increases and the shear ramps up as well, we can see that there. So I think we're going to now take a look at our, believe going to be the most substantial day for severe weather, this 3-day period. And that's going to be tomorrow. This is going to be on the 5th, April 5th. So we're going to look, and we're just going to see how that line of storms continues to move eastward. And we can see how there could be some supercell development ahead of the line. Again, I think these will struggle to mature, but given the environment that the storms would be in, if they manage to mature, you know, we really don't want to bank on that, because, again, this model shows 1, 2, 3, 4, possibly 5 mature supercells. I really don't think that's going to happen, but if we get 1 mature supercell, then that's going to have a threat of a strong tornado, so we need to take that seriously, because we don't know whether that's going to develop, but if it does, it's going to be a very substantial tornado threat. And even in the line of storms, because the low-level shear is so strong, I do think we could see a strong tornado threat develop even in that. And we can see how matures into a line, again, possibly more discrete supercell development. HRR is very aggressive with this development, and I don't think it'll be nearly as robust as what it's showing. We can see how this continues to develop, and as instability surges eastward, which again we'll show you later, you can see the line of storms continues. Again, more discrete supercell development possible. I don't think we're going to see this much, but I think a good takeaway from this is that if a discrete supercell does evolve, it will have a significant risk of a strong tornado. So, if you happen to notice when you see a warning, you just need to take all the warning. You always want to take warnings very seriously, but especially tomorrow, because you could be dealing with stronger tornadoes, some stronger damaging winds as well. Wouldn't surprise me if there's a few instances of hurricane force wind gusts tomorrow as well, just because the low level shear is so strong. So that's how the HRR plays it out. Now we're going to look at the mixed layer Cape. And we're going to see how, even into the morning hours, these are values of around 1,000. So that's very substantial considering the fact we have already strong low-level shear. If we have sufficient instability in strong low-level shear, even in a line of storms, you can absolutely get a good bit of tornadoes as well. And again, I'm focusing a lot on the tornado risk. Damaging winds and isolated instances of large hail are definitely also possible. And we can see how the hodograph, again, the hodograph is looping. That's not a good sign, because that signals the potential for tornadoes. So you don't want to see a looping hodograph. So, and we can see the lapse rates generally aren't great, and that's why I think the storms are going to struggle to mature. poor lapse rates generally lead to a messy storm mode. And that's why I think the HRR solution is very aggressive, because despite the weak lapse rates, it still develops all those mature supercells. And again, I just don't think that's going to happen tomorrow, but I totally believe it's possible that we could get a couple of them to develop compared to several during various areas anywhere from southern Mississippi into perhaps South Carolina. So anywhere in that broad zone, you could see a supercell develop ahead of the line. And while I think they will be isolated in the instances that they mature, a strong tornado threat would be very elevated with that. And now we're going to look. I've been talking a lot about the low-level shear. Well, actually, let me make sure this plays completely through. So you can see how the cape increases with daytime heating areas east, and it makes its way into parts of the South Carolina. And now we're going to look at the winds, upper level, look at the low-level wind field. And this is why I am very concerned about tomorrow. Again, it's not going to be like what we saw last week. It's not going to be that bad. I know I'm saying I'm very concerned about it. I was even more concerned about last Wednesday, but we can see how this strong low-level wind shear will be in place. This is about 7 in the morning. A 50 to 60 knot low-level jet. That's very powerful. And we can see how it's only going to increase as we get into the late morning hours across southern Alabama. So let's take a sounding here and look how much looping there is in that photograph. And we have cape over 1,000. So let's see, we have sufficient cape, we have strong low-level shear, we have dew points in the 70s. This, again, despite the more linear storm mode, strong tornadoes are definitely possible with this, and I would probably say likely, with that sounding. We're just going to keep, we kind of moved in the wrong area. I guess we're going to keep moving east and pick some soundings a little farther east now. Okay, so this is a little bit of a contaminated sounding. It's in the storm, so let's just go a little bit further east. Still contaminated. So we're going to go back to reflectivity to get another sounding so we can pick an area that's not in convection. So let's go out in here. There's not as much instability there. So that's why there's not as much instability there, so even that might make it more difficult for the discrete storms to mature, despite the strong low-level shear. Combine that with the weak lapse rates, and we're going to look at the bulk shear now. Again, and we can see how values are going to be very favorable. They are going to possibly be, looks like they might be higher than they are tonight. Across the day tomorrow, we can see 50 knots, maybe probably just a little higher than what they were today, maybe like 45 to 60 knots of bulk shear. You're just going to see how that continues to move eastward, and that's going to supply the chance for that line of storms to mature. You could get a supercell embedded within the line, which would also have an elevated risk of a strong tornado, so you got to watch that. And we're going to look at the 0 to 3 kilometer cape. And this isn't perfect, but it shows the cape in the low levels of the atmosphere, which is the most important layer of cape for tornadoes. So for a robust tornado threat, you want to see values over 100, which will be in the yellows. And we can see how we do get the values in there. So you get values over 100 easily, especially across southern Alabama. So it seems to be a lot of the ingredients will be coming together tomorrow for a tornado outbreak. Not what I initially thought a couple of days ago. I'll admit I was wrong with that forecast a couple of days ago. It's why it's important to not see a forecast a couple days ago and just lock in as that's what's going to happen. Because things change. And they change a lot. You can see these strong low-level shear here. Values over 200. Even maybe over 300. So this strong low-level shear is going to continue to increase that tornado threat. especially when you get, if you were to get an instance of an isolated supercell. So we're going to look at the energy helicity index now. We're just going to see, again, this is a blend of wind shear and instability. You can see how the values just explode, especially on this model across southern and southern Alabama, especially southwestern Alabama. So I will say, I mean, really anywhere, let's go back to the Storm Prediction Center's page. Anywhere within the 10%, and especially the significant area, needs to be on alert for tornadoes tomorrow. I mean, anywhere in here, but especially this quarter right in here. But I kind of wouldn't surprise me if we see the significant expanded a little farther west. This is my area that I think has the greatest tornado potential, though really anywhere, I mean, you have to go back to the day one. Anywhere really in this area here has a decent shot of there being a tornado within, has at least a 10% chance of having a tornado within a 25-mile radius, which is significant. So we're going to switch back and just continue to play this through and see how as that instability increases with still that strong low-level shear. We can see even into South Carolina, tornado threat, especially with any discrete cell, is definitely there. I don't think I ever finished showing the 850 millibar height all the way through. You can see continues 50 knot low level jet. It's just going to keep going through, and that's going to lead to a pretty substantial tornado risk, I believe. And now we're going to switch over to the NAM 3K, and we're going to show the reflectivity for this. You can see here's our squall line. And we can see how the NAM not nearly as aggressive with the discrete supercell development ahead of the line. We can still see the strong line of storms capable of damaging winds 60, 70, perhaps even 80 miles per hour, and it's going to continue to race eastward. Now, the line tends to weaken a little bit more on the NAM 3K, and what I think that is when you look at the Cape, it's less aggressive. We can still see, while maybe not quite as much as the HRRR, we still have values around approaching 1,000 across this area in here. But then when we get farther east, it's still there, but especially for the Carolinas, I guess it does get there, so maybe that's not what's causing it. But the photograph's really straight on that, but the line tends to weaken a little bit. I would not bank on that happening. Again, especially because it does seem like the instability is there. I would not bank on that happening because, I mean, if there's still moderate instability and at least modest, if not moderate, instability overlapping strong shear, there's good reason to think that line would maintain its intensity. So we're going to look at the significant tornado parameter. Again, not perfect, but if you know storms are in the area, it's a good way to see where purely the environment is most favorable for tornadoes. You can see to the morning hours, early afternoon ramps up. We can see how it continues to build up, and it's a very weirdly isolated bias. It's not, yeah, that's weird. That's not actually happening. But and just see how the instability, again, not the strongest instability, but with a very strong low-level shear, that could make up for areas of weaker instability and still get a fairly robust tornado threat. And sorry if I keep just repeating weak instability, high shear. That's kind of what the setup is. Again, areas of moderate instability could also develop, but the shear is just going to make up for the instability was just set up in that case. So I keep repeating that on a broken record because that's what I think is going to happen. We're just going to take a quick look at the dew points just to show you why there's that cape even in the morning hours. You can see it's because, look, we have these dew points into the mid to upper 60s, perhaps even getting into the 70s, low 70s. So even if there's not the most daytime heating, that's still going to result in some amount of cape. likely around 1,000, given the other values may be like ranging from like 750 to 12,500, which is definitely sufficient. So we're now gonna take a quick look at the NAM, and I will say for this setup, the day 3 setup, I looked at the 12Z. I'm looking at the 18Z live now, so again, I'm just not going into as much detail, and if I'm jumping back and forth with what I'm looking at, maybe some minor contradictions, it's probably because I'm just reacting to what I'm seeing, because there's going to be changes from 12 to 18Z. It's not the exact same model. So we're going to look here, and we're going to see that that's the Tuesday setup, but here comes the Wednesday setup in, and we can see how this quarter of Cape develops right down here. So we're just going to take a sounding. We'll take a look at the northern area first. Again, the photographs are not going to be nearly as favorable as what they were the day before. That's why I think the tornado threat is going to be a lot lower. Definitely still there. Definitely isolated tornadoes are possible, but it's going to be a lot lower than what it is going to be on the 5th. This day is on the 6th, just for reference. And now we're going to take a sounding further south, where there's going to be more instability. Still not great low-level shear. So again, that tornado threat's going to be more isolated, but this is going to be a line of storms. And as such, I think the damaging wind threat will be elevated. And we're going to look Wednesday. We can see here's that line of storms here. This isn't the highest res model, so it's going to struggle to pick up on it, but you can see here a line of storms will develop, will move southeastward, and will be capable of strong damaging winds, perhaps in instances of large hail and tornadoes as well, though I do think damaging wind is going to be the big risk for day 3. Day 3, or, well, that will be Wednesday the 6th. So we are also going to just take a look at the shear, see what ends up developing Wednesday. Again, the shear is not going to be as robust, and not that that's like upper level shear, low level shear, low level helicity for a tornado threat, it's not going to be there as much. Again, this would support an isolated tornado threat, but nothing too robust, and again, we'll show you that in our 850 jet. Let's see. Actually, I think we might be able to take a look at this on the HRRR. Not on the HRRR, on the NAM 3K. How far out does this go? Yeah, we can look at this here, on this. Okay. So we're going to see on Wednesday, the low-level jet, it's just not going to be there nearly as much. Here, let's see if we can get a better look at that squall line on this. And it's very weak on it. I don't know why it's doing that, I'm going to be honest. It ramps it up pretty late. So that's very something interesting to watch and see if the storm coverage, if the intensity of the line, despite fairly a pretty good instability access and favorable deep layer shear, at least we're going to have to watch. I would suspect this would uptrend in coverage, or uptrend in intensity, but that is definitely something to watch, and I will be updating you on that tomorrow. But thank you for joining me, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.